What if you could remember the last time you died? What if you could sit in your flat or apartment or house and think to yourself, I really hated getting hit by that truck. That was a crap way to die. I'd much rather die of flu like I did last month. What if you could do that? What would that be like? What would your life be like? I will say I've watched Bong Joon-Ho's entire film on this subject without getting an answer to that question. But it does ask it, and many others besides. It's a brilliant film about looking back, living in time, taking stock of where your life is and the fact that your life is short, and it sets all of those normal existential questions in a charged political context that mirrors our own. The story is of Mickey, played by Robert Pattinson, in a really superb performance, doing one of his voices, which I'll say a bit more about in a minute, where he is a young man who's fleeing loan sharks on Earth, who are the kind of people who will kidnap you and cut you up if you don't pay your debt to them. And he can't pay because his business has gone wrong. So with a friend, he flees to a space colony, a colonized planet. And this colonization project is run by a politician, an evil politician, something of a white supremacist, and also someone who appears to be into space travel and colonization of new planets as a solution to his own issues with his ego and the problems of life on Earth. Now, as to which hybrid figure this could possibly represent, and how many different leading figures in our own politics could be inside this character, Bong Joon-Ho has said nothing, but I think names spring instantly to mind. Robert Pattinson is signed up because he's a rather hapless character. He hasn't read the form properly, and he signs up as an expendable. An expendable is someone who can be experimented on until they die and then be reprinted with the same memories and the same body. And we watch this happen. We watch Pattinson, Mickey's body being discarded down a sort of into a kind of infernal space where it's reprocessed and then spat out again of a printer. And those moments are done brilliantly by Pattinson, because as he emerges naked as a newborn from the printer, he's also as floppy and adult as a corpse. In fact, given that he's repeatedly dying and being reborn, there's also something, obviously, there's a bit of a pietà about it, the movement of the body, the spreading of the arms. But the point seems to be, as I think Margaret Atwood once said, our big problems are birth, then death, then there's in between. And that seems to be the statement his body makes every time it comes out. Birth and death are very close, and what are you going to do with the time between? Well, the time between is curtailed and horribly imprisoned for Pattinson and his fellow missionary colonists because they are all controlled by this cruel ex-politician and his wife, played by Toni Collette. And he's played by Mark Ruffalo. People's names keep coming and going as I talk through this, because there are so many characters and there's so much story. At the same time as all this is going on, we also have an entire story about the indigenous creatures and non-human creatures who live on the planet, whose faces are kind of composed entirely of legs like grubs, and whom the evil colonist names creepers. But the question of whether or not that insulting name actually fits them is one that the film also asks. So it's also doing about 80% of what Alien did, as well as all of these other things. It's the central storyline involves Mickey being printed out accidentally twice, two of him being alive at the same time, which is illegal, and therefore will lead to both of them being extinguished. I mean, I can't even summarize these stories. There's more world building in this film than there is in 2 or 3 Star Wars films. And the point seems to be that you can't fit it all into one film any more than you can fit all of Mickey into one life. It's about how we live in time and the fact that we are trapped by it, and the film itself rails against that by forcing us to consider a world much larger than it's willing to really explore in the time of the film. Meanwhile, it lingers over other moments rather too long. So is this poor pacing or part of the film's general experiment and statement about the difficulty of life in time? I don't know. I like to think the latter because I like Bong Joon-Ho. And actually, that enjoyment of his work is one of the things that really came out from this film, because what he's doing, as well as having a character look back on death and re-experience life, he's looking back on his own career in this film. And I think that that's career, Career, sorry, don't have the words in front of me. It's brilliantly done because I think it brings together three films in his back catalogue that I really love. One is Parasite, whose inky dark, stark, allegorical treatment of social class and oppression it clearly shares. One is The Host from 2006, which is a brilliant monster movie, and I kept thinking about these witty, moving, poignant figures with the grub-like faces. You would think that they would be horrifying, but actually they're touching and sweet as well, and that's quite interesting. And they're also very witty. It's done in a way that will make you laugh. And it reminds me of the monster in The Host, where also it kind of was done in a way that touched on comedy. And finally, and for me most importantly, it reminded me of Memories of Murder, which is an early film of his, where completely different, doesn't have the starkness or the commercial potential actually of either of the other two ideas. It's not as showy. It's a story about a man investigating a serial killer who has gradually to accept that it could be any of the ordinary men in the town where he lives. And it's a study of memory and also of violence. And in a way, what else is this film about? The voice that Robert Pattinson has come up with for this film, and I think it's time to start talking about Pattinson's voices the way we talk about Meryl Streep's accents. I heard him do The Boy and the Heron, and now he's doing this. The voice that he does for this is a brilliant compound. I could pick up, it has many fathers, this voice. I could pick up a bit of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. I could pick up a bit of Forrest Gump. And I could also pick up, to me most movingly, a bit of Truman from The Truman Show. Because it has that same burbly naivety that becomes increasingly anxious. Even though it also has some roots in Scorsese. I mean, it sort of feels like a side character from one of Scorsese's movies, which is quite apt considering he's running away from organised crime. But this kind of mingled yarn of this voice, I loved it. And it really made me think about The Truman Show, which is quite a similar film in that it's about a character who's trapped in a nightmare that's sort of a mirror of the contemporary world and who becomes liberated from it, potentially, via a glitch. Something's gone wrong. And a glitch in the Matrix, no less. And I, felt the same. I saw The Truman Show when it came out in cinemas, and I remember feeling the same kind of wounded, scared sadness at the end of that film that I felt at the end of this film as well. And I think it's because this is a film about an everyman, an endlessly replaceable, expendable worker in an unequal society. But in this film, to be an everyman is also to operate in an atmosphere of psychopathic cruelty, of violence. And I think that's the one thing The Truman Show almost foresaw, but didn't quite, about the world that we have created since. This is a moving film, a film that looks back, a film that makes you laugh, and a film that will frighten you. And if you're in the mood, and I really couldn't tell you what mood that is, I think you should see it.